Hey everyone, and welcome back to episode 11 of the Developers Unplugged podcast. Today, got very special guests with me. Got Tiffany. Tiffany, thank you very much for joining episode 11. For people that don't know who you are at all, do you mind giving a bit of an introduction?
Yeah, sure. So, like you said, my name is Tiffany. I'm a Canadian. I'm based in Berlin. I've been in Berlin for 17 years. I've been in software development for over 20 years. And a huge portion of that time, I worked at SoundCloud. So I worked there for about 11 years. I did a lot of different things at SoundCloud. And by a lot of different things, I mean, I did a lot of different roles. I was on the design team. I was a product manager. I was a tech lead. I was a engineering manager. Eventually, I was a VP of engineering there. And I left SoundCloud a few years ago and went off to do consulting and coaching with a business partner. My business partner then decided he was going to move back to the UK, and I've been kind of on my own, continuing technical leadership coaching for the last year or so on my own. But I've also, in the past 18 months, I went back to having a full-time job at a company. And for the last 9 months, I was the squad lead for an AI features team at a software as a service company on a greenfield project. So that's sort of who I am. That's my background. Some people know me as being involved in JS topics, especially in Berlin, 10 years ago. So that's me.
Amazing. I mean, there's a lot to take in there, isn't there?
I mean, I did give you a 20-year recap, so.
In about 1 minute, I think.
Yeah.
So well done for doing that as well. It's quite impressive to recap 20 years there. I guess, do you know one thing that's kind of stood out for me? Why is it that, because you're from Canada, you say, and you've still got the accent, of course, the Canadian accent. How come, so sort of 17 years ago, kind of take me back to then, though, why is it that you kind of then moved to Berlin out of all places?
Yeah, I actually was just having this conversation recently. And so why I moved to Berlin was a big why not. But I think the why not has a lot to do with what was happening in Toronto, which is where I was living, and what was happening in the world. So I graduated. I was doing a cooperative co-op program at my university. I studied electrical engineering, and I graduated directly into the dot-com bust. And I had studied electrical engineering, and I had studied photonics, and that industry completely collapsed in 2001. And so what I had studied, that whole, like I said, that whole industry literally took down the Canadian economy. If you go back and look at it, companies like Nortel were just completely, decimated, beyond decimated. And, I found myself interested in web development. I had done it as a hobby in university, and I got sort of into this field through a friend, and I really was enjoying it. And then another friend of mine, also from university, was like, "Hey, we're looking for someone with exactly your skill set here in Berlin. Like, why don't you move to Berlin?" And I was like, "Why not?" And what I found in Berlin was an environment where there was a really vibrant, excited group who were learning web technologies. They were professionalizing web technologies. At the time, we'd all been told, web development, JavaScript, that's not real programming. And it wasn't very professionalized, it's true. And so that time in Berlin, what I found was a place where I could have a job where I was learning every day with a team of people who validated the skills that I had and the interests that I had, and got paid enough to have an extremely comfortable lifestyle, where we could rock up to some place, have an hour-long lunch, come back to work, finish up there, spend our evenings, poking around Berlin. And it was just a really enjoyable lifestyle. And when I compared that to Toronto, where everybody was literally running around chasing any kind of like eking out a life, it really, and that would be anybody who's from Toronto who stayed there is going to maybe wonder what I'm talking about, because they obviously have a really great life there too. But it didn't suit me. It didn't fit me. So that's why I moved to Berlin, was sort of spontaneously because a friend suggested it. And the reason I stayed is because I found this, fertile place for me to develop myself, and be in a community, and be here. And part of the reason I've been thinking about that time and having this sort of nostalgic feeling is actually because in the last 18 months, when I started to work hands-on again as a programmer with, as a sort of product lead with a tech lead, working on these new topics, this feels like an equally exciting time with a lot of transition. There was this huge transition to mobile phones, getting the web on your phone, having apps for everything. There was this huge transition away from like Flash to HTML5 and CSS3, and we were all learning all these new APIs and SDKs and ways of working and offline first and all these things. And I really feel this energy again, that makes I'm reminded of this time, and I was talking about this time in the past because there's an energy now. Yeah.
Interesting. And like I say, thank you so much for sharing all that. And you're so right, aren't you? I mean, when you say about this time, are you talking about like the buzz around ML and AI?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm speaking about not just generative AI, which is in everybody's LinkedIn post around, how they're working as a programmer, but I think that, how this technology is going to land for the end user is still to be seen, right? Like there are, people are using ChatGPT, but that is sort of LLM in a bottle. And as our chat clients become tool enabled, as they become agentic in the sense of they are able to take action outside of the closed bubble of ChatGPT or Claude or whatever client you're using, software companies are going to have to figure out what is it that they're offering that customers want to buy and use, that helps them get their work done or their life organized or whatever it is they're using their computer for. We saw this explosion of apps on the phone, and people were like, what are these apps even for? I don't know if you remember, there was this app which was like $99 US, and it was just called like I'm Rich or something, and it was just like a picture of a diamond. And people were building all these kind of useless apps. They didn't really know what to do with them. They didn't know what a phone app should be. And I feel like we're in this, like, what is it to add LLM features, agentic features? What does it mean to offer this to users? And how do users understand what is being given to them and how to use it? That feels really familiar and also brand new.
It's very true. It feels like we're in kind of like a transitional phase. Like with this, it's not a new technology. It's been around for a while, right? But it's kind of becoming more mainstream, I suppose.
Yeah.
But you're so right. When we kind of go through these cycles, there are like with the kind of app store boom with the iOS and Android development, that was like a huge thing, and it still is, of course. But there was like these apps that were just pointless, right? And people were just creating an app thinking that they would be like multimillionaires. And VCs were like investing loads of money into these people. And it's kind of the same thing that we're seeing now, but now that we know that there's a few apps that have stayed around that benefit people's lives and make things actually a lot easier, it's kind of like maybe startups as well, right? Every startup at the moment, it seems like they have some kind of integration with AI, and they know that VCs are going to back them because it's like the new kid on the block sort of thing. But maybe, do you think like in a few years, like maybe 3 or 4 years, that the ones that actually have purpose are going to be the ones that stay, and the ones that do not are the ones that are kind of phased out, almost like that same cycle with app development?
I absolutely think that, and but I also believe that in the world of software development, like a healthy, you want to have people who are risky, who are trying things, and I think that where we have to be careful is that we're not irresponsible with how we spend resources. And I mean how we spend resources in terms of like who's not getting money, who deserves to get money, what are we funding in lieu of what are we not funding in lieu of funding some other risky ideas? I think we have to be careful about that. And I'm also talking about, obviously the like physical resources required to, power these ideas. So I don't think that we should just be like wastefully exploring ideas, but I do think that, the product, the product mindset is like try things as cheaply as possible, find out whether it works, stop doing it if it's not meaningful. So when you have a new technology, you kind of hope people are trying lots of things. And that means that we're going to more quickly find the things that are meaningful. But there can be so much noise, especially for people who, I remember like the Facebook UI, every time in the Facebook UI, people were like, the Facebook UI has changed. Why are they changing everything? And then eventually it settles down. So people are not so interested in investing a lot of time learning something new only to have it be taken from them. So I think there's always going to be people who are like trying the new thing. And those are the people who are going to be the guinea pigs who find out what's meaningful. And also there's going to be new patterns which exist. So what are some of the things we're talking about AI, everybody's talking about it, but I'm interested more in like, what are people really using it for, both for their work and for their personal life?
Yeah, there's a really good question. Obviously, I work in recruitment, and I probably get sold or try to get sold an AI tool every day. And at the start, I think that it's really interesting, right? We talk about cycles, and when ChatGPT was like mainstream, and then there was like all of these startups and all of these like ideas, I think a lot of businesses and a lot of companies, not just Berlin was guilty of this, but worldwide, a lot of companies was like, amazing, we don't have to use recruiters anymore. We can just like, and a lot of people in the recruitment industry, colleagues of mine were like, I think I could lose my job here because AI will take over. And a lot of that is true to a degree. There will be certain aspects of my job and your job and everybody else's job that's going to be different in a couple of years because of AI. But really, what a lot of companies found was that they was missing out on some really great candidates because these AI tools would look through the CV, look for keywords, and they wouldn't be there. And they would just reject them, auto rejects, without a human being even seeing them. And there's actually been so many companies over the last 6 to 12 months that have got recruitment AI tools and like recruitment AI services that have actually gone bust because a lot of businesses are no longer using them because the idea of it was really good. Let AI screen all of these people. You can even talk to a robot, by the way, now for a first stage interview, which is really not good. I don't agree with it at all. And a lot of people are now coming back to me and saying, hey, it didn't work. So let's just kind of keep it as it is. So to kind of answer your question, at the moment, things are kind of returning back to how they were like pre-2022, 3 years ago. But it has been a couple of years where a lot of people in the recruitment industry have decided like maybe they shouldn't be in it anymore. Maybe we're going to be replaced. But really, a lot of what I do is still very similar. I work in a people business. The best engineers that I speak to, I look at their CV and I tell them as well, I say, hey, there's like nothing in here at all. It's not a very good CV. But they're clearly very talented people, but you have to talk to them. You have to ask them the questions and you have to be a human being. So,
yeah. As somebody who is not working in HR, but is like sort of on the outside and experiencing it, I've heard a lot of people talking about, it was super hard to even get a screener for a year or so there, and now it's easier. Is the change, how much of that change is related to this technology versus where the money is? Like, there was this whole like, oh, look over here, crypto for a while, that also happened. How much of the change that people are feeling is also related to the change in the tooling? Do you think there, have you noticed that there's like a lot more jobs available now? And so you're more active?
Yeah, interesting. I think companies have tried to reduce staff as much as they can. And when I say companies, I mean CEOs and founders. So I look at Klarna for a really good example. Klarna, when AI was, there was this whole thing about AI taking over jobs and stuff. Again, 2022 was like a huge doom and gloom thing for AI. It was like everyone was like, oh my God, comparing Einstein to a fly and we're the fly and Einstein is AI. I do agree that that is the case and it will be at that level in terms of IQ. But Klarna was the first to say, and quite publicly, it was quite crazy really. The CEO came out and was like, every year, I think it was every year, we're going to reduce the staff by 20% or something like that, and we're going to replace them with AI. And it was like, really, it was like almost like he was gloating about it and boasting about it. And that was really, these are people's lives. These are thousands and thousands of people. And so to kind of answer your question, there was a kind of a bit of a mini, not like a recession, but there was a mini
contraction.
Really, yeah, and it was sharp. It was very, very sharp. And it was only until a few months afterwards when people realized that, a robot or a machine cannot do everything, in terms of customer service. It meant that the customers that were trying to get through to human beings, they could not anymore at Klarna. Look at Klarna's, stocks, they're falling through the sky. It's not a very good site anymore. A lot of that is down to the fact that they really wanted to replace people as quickly as possible. And they took the human element away from their brand and their business. Just didn't like that at all. So like I say, it's kind of like, for me, I've seen a cycle and now I'm kind of returning back to it, which is amazing to see, because it's like AI has got its place. I'm not fearing it and I don't think anyone should. But then I also think at the same time, it's like, we shouldn't be so hasty to just disregard human beings.
Absolutely.
But there certainly was a contraction. For like 2 years, there was less jobs. It was like what they would say, like a buyer's market, if that makes sense, where like hiring managers had a lot of power. They often lowballed a lot of people. Again, this isn't just in Berlin, but this is across Europe, where I speak to colleagues of mine that work in different markets. And it was very common for people to get lowballed in their offers. I even spoke to somebody the other day that they said that at the start of this year, when it was kind of rife for that, they'd gone through at 85,000 in salary expectations. They were at 95, but they took a drop of 10K and a company had offered them 70.
Yeah.
And there was a technical lead, and it was just kind of like they're really pushing their luck because they know that there's a limited amount of jobs on the market. I've seen since then, thankfully, an increase, but it was a scary time,
Yeah.
So there's like a lot of short-term trends, if that kind of answers your question in terms of the market.
Yeah, so a lot of different things. Yeah, and the thing that I was seeing, when I was in leadership position in 2021, we had felt like in 2020 there was this big concern that everything was going to drop. People had all these hiring freezes. Turns out some businesses really benefited from everybody being at home, and there were these huge spikes in demand. The thing that I really saw happen in the end of 2020 and the beginning of 2021 is that suddenly, because everybody was able to work remote, everybody was working remote. Now, San Francisco salaries were being offered to, Berlin people, or like, a company that never hired outside of Sweden was suddenly poaching people from wherever. And what we then had was like this massive escalation of salary, because it was the seller market where a person could say, well, I wasn't looking, but I got this call and they're offering me 20K more. And suddenly as an employer, you have to say, well, if I offer you 20K, we have this strong sense of fairness. We can't actually go outside of our price, our pay bands. And then everybody you're hiring, is it like, it just like ratcheted up and up and up. And we got to this new heated level. And then to me, what I saw was that 2022 was the reversal of that, where they're like, oh, we way over leveraged ourselves in some way, if that's the right terminology, competing for people. And now we're going to go the other way. And especially with, investment money shifting away from the companies that had previously been investing in and were investing again. That was like the crypto phrase. I can't even say these words. Crypto craze. So yeah, it seems like there was that was also happening, which is like, they basically companies like mass offloaded people, and to me that felt like they were trying to divest from this overinvestment. They
So
were like, if they're laying off people, then we can lay off people, and then we can rehire their people at 20K less than we offered them last year.
the whole like COVID thing and the remote thing, like that was a real, that kind of shifted everything. It was like everything was on its head, because you're so right. Like I hear this a lot. There's a lot of people that work in Berlin and are based in Berlin and work for a Silicon Valley startup. And the problem that you have there, it's a nice problem to have, but these people are on salaries of $200,000 plus. And Berlin cannot compete with that. No way. There are maybe a couple, I would say 99% of the businesses in Berlin cannot compete with the US salaries. That's just a fact. There's 1% that can, and that's great. But it's really, really hard to compete with these people. So the problem that you've got, I guess, from like an engineering perspective is like, if you've just recently if you've got a job with a San Francisco startup and you're getting paid 200K and you're a senior software engineer in Berlin, you have to either take a significant...
Your hands are tied, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you have to take at least a 50% pay cut to join a team in Berlin locally, or you have to just continuously stay at a US kind of time zone, or maybe even relocate. But it's really, really tough. But a lot of San Francisco startups are no longer hiring people as well in North America. It's European based because the quality is still super good and the prices are like
cheaper.
Yeah,
because they were never offering true San Francisco prices. They were just cutting the difference, which was still crazy difference. Yeah. And then, this is outside of the engineering realm now. But then what ends up happening is you have people want a bigger apartment because they're working from home and they've got more money to pay. And suddenly 2 people are moving into an apartment built for 4 people and paying way more. And then you have a housing crisis as well. And all of this, I see them all being very related.
It's lifestyle inflation, isn't it? Lifestyle inflation. So for people, I guess, that maybe are watching this that don't know what that is, it's like if you have a huge salary, you're absolutely right. If you've got if you was on 90,000 and then you've just signed a contract for $200,000 for a US startup, you're living in Berlin, you've got so much disposable cash now. So you can really, get a really nice car. You can go on vacation to all these amazing places, and you eventually kind of become insensitive to the other salary and the lifestyle that you had before. It's just human nature to want more. And so you naturally have all of these huge expenses every month to kind of make up, and that's the lifestyle inflation. And it's like, you kind of said it best, you kind of chained to this job, you're chained to this salary now, because as much as it's a great thing that you're on this salary, it's also not realistic,
Yeah, you mentioned it's human nature to want more. So I'm, what year is it? 2025? I'm 47. Is that right? Yeah, 49? Yeah. 48? Maybe I'm 48. Anyway, maybe I'm 47. Point is, I feel like what you're saying is true. And, at some point in time, I'd heard this thing about, you have your earnings peak at a certain age, and I didn't really understand why that was. I was like, oh, do companies devalue older people? That doesn't make sense. But actually the earning peak isn't that you have this earning potential. It's that you have the willingness to take a position that pays you a certain amount. And then you do that for a while. And then you actually are like, wait a minute, what is this life that I'm living? What does it take for me to get in this place? Is the work that I'm doing meaningful? Do I have time in my life for other things? This is work-life balance, but to the level of saying, okay, what is my exit strategy from working, right? You get to a point where you're more than halfway through your work career and you're like, right, what is 55-year-old me doing? What is 65-year-old me doing? How do I get from where I am to there? And what am I willing to do that? And that is where I'm actually at. I'm
Yeah.
actually at this point in my career where I'm saying, oh, what is the path to what I would like to be doing at 55? What am I doing when I'm 55? You know, because, 2020, good reminder, was only 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And so 5 years from now is sooner than it seems. So this is sort of where I'm thinking. I'm thinking about like what do I want to be doing. So these things all play into it as well.
Yeah.
What do you have the
100%.
energy and appetite for at any given time?
Yeah, well, that's it though, isn't it? There's like a saying, and someone had said it to me the other day. I said the other day, it was like maybe a few months ago. It feels like the other day. And it was like, there was like different people want different things from their job at different points in their life.
Mm-hmm.
So true, right? Like when you're young and you're just starting out, like you say, like when you was like all the way like 2 decades ago, 20 years ago, I'm sure that you was like wanting to join anything at all, just eager to learn, eager to just throw yourself in, work every hour of the night, maybe. I'm not too sure. But work-life balance in your 20s, like especially early 20s, just graduating and whatever, your first job in like engineering, it's exciting, right? And I speak to
Your
some
work is your life. It can be, right? Yeah.
exactly, and then like you have different life commitments. Again, everyone's got a different route, right, in their like life, but typically in your 30s, you have like maybe a family or like some kind of mortgage or rent or something that kind of ties you down. You then kind of want the hybrid route in like your 40s, your 50s. You want to work remotely, flexible working hours, part time. It really, really is interesting, isn't it? Like it depends massively, I guess, on what people are looking for. That's why I say it's a huge trap sometimes, lifestyle inflation, which is why you got to be really careful because
Yeah.
if you do have all of these amazing things, which is great, um, you have to keep that up every month, right? Which is really, really tough. And then you are literally locked in completely on that salary, maybe for the rest of your life.
Yeah. If you're not self-aware,
Yeah.
that is what you've done. That is what you've chosen. Yeah.
I was going to say, Tiffany, I'm just conscious of time as well. Just in the last couple of minutes, I want to ask you a question here. Just
Sure. Yeah.
I asked pretty much everyone that's on here, but I think especially it really rings true for you as well because you've got so much experience, and clearly, you're really excited about this kind of next phase within tech and AI and ML, and so am I. I think everybody should be. But what advice would you give to like a software engineer in 2025 who has maybe like 3 or 4 years experience? Um, what advice would you give almost like, I guess, to your former self as well, if you were starting out in
Yeah.
today's
Yeah.
world?
Yeah. So I think that it's difficult for me because the world that I learned in was a lot different. I would say that don't isolate yourself from the people who are a bit more experienced than you. Like people talk about pair programming, but I think that um, getting exposure to the way other people use their tools, the way the tools that other people are using, um, gives you insight into what you could be doing, right? So like as a software engineer, especially if you're working remote, you're at your own computer, you've got your own tools, your own awareness, and even no matter how interested you are in other topics, you might never see someone, you might not be aware of things that are out there. And so if there isn't a formalized way to do pair programming in your work environment, or you work in a setup where you're quite isolated in your work, try and find someone who is either at your level or more experienced than you, and it doesn't even have to be those things, it can be just anyone, and say like, hey, let's work on something together, and let's talk things through together, because you will be exposed to, yeah, like a new tool, or even if it can be something as simple as like, oh wait, you did an interesting shortcut there, what was that? Or like, oh, you have your IDE set up differently than me. I think that like just getting connected to other people and seeing how they do things is really important, especially at that years and your experience. And then the other thing I would say is the world that we are in now with generative AI means that you have to become an expert at reading code and evaluating its quality. And in the past, a lot of that was left to more experienced engineers. You'd write your code, you didn't do a lot of refactoring necessarily, or, and I think that, learning the fundamentals of refactoring, and there's lots of books out there about that, learning the fundamentals of refactoring, learning the fundamental activity of looking at code line by line and knowing what it does is now a fundamental quality. A lot of times in the past, you could just write code and never have to read it again. And that's a future you problem, right? A lot of people prefer to write code than read code. You need to be skilled at reading code, because if you have AI generate code for you, you can't just commit it. People talk about vibe coding. Vibe coding is stage one. Stage two is like code review. Have a critical opinion about the code that has been generated that you're going to put your name on. And so, yeah, get good at reading code and understanding code. And the other thing is like pair with other people, see what's interesting out there. Those are my two pieces of advice for people at that stage.
That's amazing. I think super relevant as well, not only now, but like for the next 5, 10, forever, many years, isn't it? I mean,
I think it was always relevant. It's just more obvious now that reading code, reading code is more important than writing it. Being able to read code is more important than being able to write it.
Interesting. Very interesting. Tiffany, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. It really has. I can't believe the time is just flown, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has. I've also enjoyed this conversation too. So yeah, thanks for inviting me to have it.
No, thank you very much. And thank you everybody for sort of listening in or watching. I'll leave Tiffany's kind of like links below. Tiffany, I don't know if you've got anything to plug or anything like that.
So I'm going to be, I don't know when people are going to watch this, but I'm going to be at We Are Developers Live Thursday and Friday this week. And like I said, I also do engineering leadership coaching. I'll provide the link for finding me. If you go to LinkedIn, it's there, but we can provide the link for initial conversation, find out if it's a coaching relationship that you want to have. And I'm in Berlin, and I love to get together and talk about this stuff generally. So we can do that way too.
Amazing. Yeah, feel free to connect to Tiffany. Like I said, I'll leave all of your links, Tiffany, just below as well in the description. But yeah, thank you so much. And maybe we can do a part 2.
Yeah, maybe. Okay, take care.
All right, thank you. Bye.